Greetings, students of rhetorical analysis and criticism. Some of you requested a PowerPoint lecture explaining how to use ratios in Burkean pentadic criticism, so here it is. Let's start with a pie chart representation of the pentad itself. I prefer to use a circle rather than a pentad to avoid suggesting visually that any one element of the pentad is always more important than any other. Remember that you can start with any slice of the pie and figure out the others based on that. I suggest you start with the element that seems most obvious to you for the project you're working on. The ratios are the relationships among the elements of the pentad. Since there are 5 elements, and each element has a relationship with each of the other 4, there are 20 possible ratios you should examine. In one sense, the ratios show us what's going on at the center of the circle, where they all meet. However, they also show us which of the 5 elements is dominant in the situation we're studying, and based on that dominant element, the ideology that is informing it. This ratio table is available on Blackboard at the same link where you found this presentation. You can download and use it if it's helpful to you. Notice that we apply the ratios in 2 steps. The first step is to examine each pair of terms, asking yourself whether the first term in the pair is controlling the second term. For example, for the scene-act ratio, we would ask ourselves whether the scene where the situation takes place controls what happens there, the act. If it does, we put a check mark in the yes column for that row. If it doesn't, we put an X in the no column. If we can't decide, we put a question mark in the column we think is most likely, or just leave both yes and no blank. The second step occurs after you've examined all 20 ratios. You then look at your results to see which element of the 5 has more check marks in the yes column than any other. With any luck, the results will be pretty clear, although it's possible that 2 elements are competing for dominance. Let's now go through an example using the Cincinnati Gateway Project, particularly with respect to the public protests regarding the use of bronze flying pigs in the artist's design. As you can see from my coding table, I considered several scenarios by varying who I thought was the agent in the situation and then filling out the other elements. I could just as easily have started with the scene or any other of the 5 pentadic elements. In this table, I also took a guess at what was motivating the agents, but you don't have to do that. Let's use just scenario 3, in which I claim that the agent is the group of citizens who attended a city council meeting in order to express their opinions about whether the flying pigs should be included in the artist's final installation. In just that sentence, I've already named most of the 5 elements of the pentad. The agent, we always use singular even if it's a group of individual agents acting together, is the citizens. The act is attending and participating in the city council meeting. The scene is the room in which the meeting took place. I'm calling it city council chambers, which is the traditional term. And the purpose is to express their opinions in order to persuade city council to make the decision the citizens want. The agency is their appearance at the meeting, understood in 2 ways, as both their attendance, but also what they looked like, wearing pig hats and snouts and carrying signs with slogans on them. Keeping these designations for the 5 elements of the pentad in mind, let's now examine the ratios. The question we ask ourselves, remember, is whether the scene, council chambers, affected each of the other elements, controlling what could happen there. I've answered yes for act, agency, and purpose, and put a question mark under yes for the agent. Here's why. City council chambers limits, through the access to the space, its layout, the number and placement of chairs and tables and so on, and the traditional rules for decorum, what people who come to the meeting can do. They could try to break the rules, sit in places where they're not allowed, and break the rules of decorum, but none of those things happened at this particular meeting. For that reason, I say that the scene controlled not only the act, attending and discussing, but possibly also the agent, the body of citizens who followed the rules. They could have acted out, but they didn't. The rules for the scene also controlled the agency, only so many things are allowed into the room. Signs and pig hats were allowed, but weapons would not have been allowed, nor would live pigs have been permitted to attend the meeting. The scene also controlled the purpose. The only reason to come to the council meeting was to participate in deliberations about the flying pigs and try to influence council's decision. Again, a person with a different purpose could have come to the meeting and protested something else entirely, in which case the scene would not have controlled that person's actions. However, that didn't happen in this case, as far as I know. Now let's look at the act. The citizens attended the meeting and either spoke, held up signs, or wore pig hats or snouts to indicate their support or opposition to the flying pigs. While the hats and snouts were unusual, speaking and holding up signs were not. Also, though the hats and snouts may have made the room look a little different than it usually did, it did not change the room in a substantial way. The act did not change the agent in a way that I can document. A person might have felt different, maybe happy and more empowered after attending the meeting, but the agent actually did make choices about the act, rather than vice versa. Also, the act of attending did not control what the purpose of the meeting was in any way. The only thing the act may have controlled, I believe, was the agency. If you're going to participate in a sort of demonstration, it's traditional to bring signs and speak up, so I put a check mark there. As for the agent, which I've described as a rather united group of citizens who came to the meeting, the citizens did not control the scene. They simply chose to go there because that's where a decision could be made. The citizens did indeed control the act of their attendance and had some limited control over the agency, the signs, statements, pig hats, and snouts. As I've pointed out, signs and statements are traditional means, so the most creative agency occurred with respect to the hats and snouts. I've put a question mark under yes in the agency row. Finally, the agent did choose a purpose to either support or oppose the use of flying pigs in the Gateway Project. Next, let's look at agency, or the means the agent used to carry out their act. You can see that I don't see the signs, pig hats, snouts, or attendants as controlling the scene. I've already said that the scene controlled the means available to the citizens. The agency also didn't control the purpose, but was selected specifically in order to carry out the purpose. I've put question marks next to scene and act because there is a sense in which you could say that the signs, hats, and snouts altered the city council room's appearance and maybe even its feel. However, the agency didn't change where the scene could take place, or even when, so it's a very limited kind of influence. I also think we could try to claim that the signs, hats, and snouts made the act seem different from what it might have seemed otherwise, but given that the agency was chosen by the agent for a specific purpose, I don't think its influence is very significant in terms of the pentadic elements. Finally, we're down to the last four ratios. You can see that I don't think the purpose of persuading City Council to vote a certain way changed where the purpose could be carried out. It took place in council chambers at the choice of both council and the citizens. Purpose, though, had some influence on the act because going to a council meeting is a traditional means for allowing citizens to have their say on city issues. I believe that purpose strongly influenced the agent, the group of citizens, who would not have been at the meeting without a reason for doing so, and that it also strongly influenced the agency, not only the traditional means of speaking and carrying signs, but definitely the choice to use pig hats and snouts. Now that we've completed that very long step 1, let's do step 2, which is pretty simple. Scene got the most check marks, so I'm going to say that this event was scene-dominated, thus enacting an ideology of materialism, which I'll explain on the next slide. I do believe that purpose was a secondary influence to scene, which Burke says enacts an ideology of mysticism. Let's see what this all means now for what I might argue about the Gateway Project in a paper employing pentadic criticism. Here's the list of ideologies that I put together, and that's available on Blackboard, again at the same link where you found this presentation. Materialism is at the top left and mysticism is at the top right. Foss's short explanation of materialism states that all facts and reality are explainable in terms of matter and motion, or physical laws. The expanded explanation from the oxfordreference.com, and there is a link to it in the ideologies document, states that when applied to cultural events, materialism means that technology, economics, and environment exert the strongest influences as variables, meaning things that can change. I've therefore written a sentence that would function as the first part of my thesis for a pentadic criticism of the project, stating that the setting in which this drama, the debate over whether the design of the project should or should not include the figures of flying pigs, determined to a great extent what kinds of actions could take place there, thus constraining both the agent, the citizens, and the means they could use to express themselves, such as oral statements and written signs. But because I think purpose was second in command, so to speak, I need to consider the ideology of mysticism, which emphasizes the unity of individuals, in this case a group united with respect to their purpose, and suggests that reality can be perceived through spiritual selfhood or unity with God or the universe. While it does sound a bit too grand for the situation, I think the fact that the citizens somehow managed to work as a unit, developing slogans and choosing to wear pig hats and snouts, expresses a vision, or maybe version, of reality that they managed to construct through their presence in the city council chambers. Therefore, I've added a second statement to my thesis saying, but the agent used some non-traditional means to express their views, pig hats and snouts, suggesting that purpose may have been secondarily dominant in this drama. That agent came together as one, using similar means to present a unified front with a unified voice. Just say yes to pigs. Although I decided that the way this event played out was scene and secondarily purpose-dominated, it could have played out in other ways. Citizens could have created an act-dominated event simply by placing themselves anywhere they wanted with their signs, hats, and snouts. They could, alternatively, have tried to control a larger situation, the art installation itself, through a sit-in at the proposed location for the flying pigs, refusing to leave until they got what they wanted, and thus creating an agent-dominated event. And, though I don't know why this thought occurred to me, a pragmatic action focused only using on effective means to an end could have involved someone herding a bunch of pigs into City Hall and just leaving the scene. That would have been entertaining, but it didn't happen. So I hope this presentation helps you as you try to apply pentadic analysis and the ratios to your topic of study. It can truly tell you some things about your topic and yourself that you might not have previously understood. Good luck!